intriguing, of course. We want to know what they're going to do, what's going to happen with Klay Thompson, what do they do with Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, what's going to happen with him? And then there's Kevon Looney. His reports yesterday are starting to swirl that he may be a candidate to get released by the Golden State Warriors, get bought out at $3 million. So if that is the end for Kevon Looney, man, what a ride for him. I don't want to jump the gun on that one, though. Hopefully Lou Dog is back. He's one of the better Warriors that we've had in recent memory. So he was on the podcast asking with Draymond Green. Hey, Draymond's been obviously in the news a lot since the season's been over, whether it's inside the NBA, whether it's his podcast. And yesterday, he discussed, a plethora of topics and ideas and concepts, but what he was talking about, taking young players under his wing. Taking players under his wing. And there's another cut that we'll get to, and it's going to toggle some memories here. And I want to know where Warrior fans are at when it comes to the sound and whether or not they even want to hear it. So here's Draymond Green as he discussed with Kevon Looney on his podcast, Draymond Green Show, how he loved taking Jordan Poole and Kevon Looney under his wing.
For me, I've tried to teach and instill everything I know into this man right here because I felt like that was my duty. Take a young guy under your wing. It is the best feeling. By the way, it was the same thing for me with Jordan Poole. When I took JP under my wing and to see him have success was the best thing for me. One of the worst feelings I've ever had as an NBA basketball player was seeing him get a contract and knowing that I f***ed it off and I couldn't celebrate his contract with him. I think he had like a party or something with his people in San Francisco or something, and like to not be able to go celebrate that with him. And I f***ed it off like I did. I ain't going to sit here and act like I didn't. I f***ed it off. I take it on the chin. It is what it is. I don't hide from my ups, just like I don't hide from my wins. When I talk to y'all about the wins I have, and I tell you, don't let us win another championship, and then I tell you about it, I'm the same way with my losses. And I messed that one up, but it hurts.
What do you think about that, Shosky?
Okay, so Kevon Looney and Jordan Poole are friends, right?
Very good friends.
Yeah.
Both from Milwaukee.
So you're going to talk about Jordan Poole with Kevon Looney. That feels a little murky. I think that puts Kevon Looney in a tough spot. And hearing Draymond on the front end try to take credit for young players' development, it feels a little disingenuous. It's like, Draymond, your tolerance level for young players on the court has been very noticeable and thin. It has not been where you've been this like, for example, Chris Paul this year. When I think of the young players, you could see the young players gravitated toward Chris Paul. Now, I can't tell what's going on at practice and the downtime of, in between games and on the road and all that kind of stuff. Like, I can't speak for any of those. I'm just going off what I see. And then when I hear these guys talk at a podium, almost every single one of the young players, whether it's Kuminga, Moody, Podziemski, TJD, we're like, man, Chris Paul really has helped me. I listen to all these interviews. When we were listening to sound every day, I don't hear a lot of young players crediting Draymond. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just, I find it ironic that he wants to take credit for them when I would say, just based off actions and things that I've heard and seen and watched, Dre, you're like the least tolerant of the young players. If anything, I feel like you've seen them as a threat. At least that's how I've interpreted it. So to hear you take credit for young players' like progress, It felt disingenuous.
He later on said about that, because what I'm focused on is it was hard for him to celebrate that. Well, yeah, we know what happened in that trading camp. We know what happened. So I'm surprised even Jordan Poole celebrated the contract, considering what happened. But because he didn't come out, he didn't come out and speak for a long time after that punch. Now, after the punch, here's what Draymond Green had to say about coming to practice that season. I want you to take a listen to this.
I was so embarrassed to be around our team last year when JP was still on the team that I came to everything. Like, I was probably late last season 20 times. And I just paid a fine because I was so embarrassed to like show my face in a time where it's like before everything started, that's when everybody like shooting the shit and like all the conversation. I was so embarrassed to show my face during those times that I would time everything up. Like, if we're on the road, I time it up to like the minute I need to get there. And if the elevator took a little bit longer than it was supposed to, I'd be late. Or if I'm leaving my crib, which is like 7 or 8 minutes away from the facility, I time it up to the minute of where I need to arrive. And if the red light right there in front of the Giants Stadium, Oracle Park, if the red light caught me, I'd be 2-3 minutes late, like, ah. And so one of Steve's rules this year was like, Draymond, don't be late. And I'm never a late guy. I was never late in my career, but last year I couldn't show my face like before. Like it was terrible. And so I was happy to be back on time this year.
It's pretty relatable though. Like, and there's like deep layers to this, but like pretty relatable when you have anxiety and you don't want to see someone for whatever reason, a former lover or somebody who burns you, or you burned somebody, or a former employee or employer, just whatever. There's a variety. It could be a family member. Like we've all had those situations where you want to avoid. So like that's relatable. It's just like, why the vehicle of an interview with Kevon Looney to use as the moment of like this, almost like him like having therapy out loud? I don't know. The whole thing struck me as very odd to bring up right now. Like, why now?
I definitely understand when you don't want to see somebody. You know, there's a girl that's going to be walking in. She's scoring you. You know what time she's going to be coming in.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're in a different spot. That's all relatable. But the way he said it, kind of half joke. It's like, man, I would time it up being late off of your actions. Off of what happened in that I just, with Kevon Looney too, why do we need to rehash this? Feels like everywhere we go, we rehash this every 6 months. And it's your actions. You hit Jordan Poole. You created that situation. Now, I don't know what Jordan Poole said. A lot of people want to speculate what he said, but was it enough to warrant a punch to the jaw? No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. And you could look at that situation right there in that training camp as one of the reasons why they didn't invest past in the second round against the LA Lakers, because of the vibe, because of things like that. One of your veterans is not coming on time because he's embarrassed by what he did. And obviously they did not get over that all season long. Their article in ESPN in January that season, where it's like Draymond starting to get his leadership back, obviously that wasn't true because he's coming in late, left and right. And so, you know, he says that, hey, I was embarrassed by it. Yeah, you should be. You should be embarrassed by this. But that doesn't, doing it with Kevon Looney, who I know was irate about the situation because he considered Jordan Poole a little brother. It just, the timing just seems off on this one. It's not, now's not the time. This is a situation that needed to be hashed out a year ago.
Yeah, but it's
a year and a half ago.
It's also, you know, one thing that I've learned in life, and it's not a catch-all, but how you talk about things that happened in the past, it matters, right? And so, like, you know, there's certain things that I'm very ashamed of that I did in my, you know, younger years and whatnot, but I don't. And I know that sometimes we laugh about things in a way to almost mask our insecurities or our anxiety over something. Like, I get all that. There's a psychological thing there. But my point being is that how you talk about your past transgressions does matter. And I think understanding your culpability and responsibility, and when you're laughing the way that he did, almost like, you know, no big deal. Like, dude, guys' careers changed. You know, the coaching staff made like, guys lost their jobs on that staff.
Guys are not here anymore.
You know, Bob Myers is no longer here. And I'm not saying that's the reason, but that definitely, like, that was a fork in the road for a variety of people whose families were uprooted for everything. And I just think that this guy is still not seeing how his actions, like, you throw the pebble into the lake and it has a ripple effect. And it's almost like he's laughing about it. And I don't know if that's masking his own insecurity over the whole situation. But, like, to me, it's irrelevant. It's like, dude, you have learned nothing. And if anything, I know that we have been kind of criticized as a station, like, you guys talked about the punch so much. Nah, I think we were spot on about it. And yeah, we got exhausted over it, but yet we're realizing now it was actually the tip of the iceberg. Well, it was way more affecting everyone involved than even we could have imagined.
Well, it was something that, you know, that season where we talked about it, and Steve, you heard Steve Kerr after the end of that season saying, hey, we maxed out. And they lost their 6 games to the LA Lakers. And I understand why he said they maxed out. Because to get that team to that point with everything that was going on behind the scenes, and I was hinting at it on this show, saying it's a direct correlation on why they don't win on the road. They won 11 road games that season. Why? Because you didn't have the camaraderie. It was a sticky situation. Maybe Poole saw Draymond, he's going to walk across the room. Draymond sees Poole, he's going to walk across the room. Hey, Jordan, what's up, man? There was none of that. You know what I'm saying? There was none of that little small talk, and yet they shared lockers together. They sat next to each other in the locker room. How awkward how awkward was that? To sit in the locker room every single day next to a guy that you got into a fist fight with. That's tough. That was embarrassing. That's been seen all over the world. So to rehash that moment with Kevon Looney, who was irate. Remember, Looney was one of the few guys who spoke about the situation, saying Draymond needs to regain our trust. Remember that? Draymond,
yeah.
He kept saying Draymond needs to regain our trust. And Draymond came back and said, well, trust isn't the word I use. And it was like, wait, is he learning? What's going on here? This is all before the season.
It just feels like, I don't want to speak for Kevon Looney, but I know if I was in that situation, like, dude, you're putting me in a really bad spot here. Well, I'm on this Zoom or whatever, and you're like saying all these things, and how am I supposed to react? My reaction to you talking is going to get clipped unintentionally, and however I am non-verbally, communicating as you're talking, like I'm now a part of this. Like, come on, you're dragging me into this now.
This situation,
that's what I would feel like.
This situation. And then you look at the Klay Thompson interview, the podcast, where he asked Klay, hey, how do you really feel about me being ejected? You're putting Klay in a tough spot where I would think something like that would be kept in the locker room, kept behind closed doors. But you have Klay on camera who's trying to answer a question about you being ejected and you being suspended. Again, it's an awkward position to be in.
Yes, that's a good point.
Like I don't. If I'm Klay, I'm thinking, man, I can't really say how I feel about you being suspended. So when you look at Kevon Looney and what's happening here, Kevon Looney may be gone. Kevon Looney may be out of here. And he's sitting there thinking like, boy, JP was my little brother. You saw when Jordan Poole came back with the Washington Wizards. Who did he gravitate towards? Him and Loon Dog were, Poole looked up to Looney because of the Milwaukee connection. And so to have that podcast and to rehash that moment, it almost, I don't want to say Draymond's trying to play the victim role in this situation, but as a cry for help, saying, hey, man, I was late all the time because I just couldn't. In the situation that you created, that's where we hear the rumblings about Steve Kerr telling, hey, I need you to take Jordan Poole to dinner. Maybe that should have happened. Maybe that should have happened to make sure that you're not late to practice, that you don't feel awkward about walking into the building. I don't know. It just feels very, very strange.
The thing that I also now immediately go to, and I don't know. Who knows what the conversations look like internally? But after all that, where he's showing up, as he's admitting, I'm going off what he's saying, late, you reward him with a 4-year deal?
Yeah.
After that, after the punch and all that, and then all the things he's saying about how he was embarrassed and ashamed and he would time things out, like you're rewarding that, I guess, lack of professionalism and workplace cohesion. Because people could say like, oh, this stuff happens in sports and whatever. We can disagree. Like, yes, I do believe that the workplace for the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball are vastly different than ours. But to say that the norm is two guys fighting in practice,
no, it's not the norm.
That clearly wasn't.
It's not the norm. It's not the norm.
But that's my point.
It was something that happened back in the day, but nobody like Xavier McDaniels of the world are God. You know what I'm saying?
But that's my point. And so all that, and like, let's remember like how it went down in the playoffs. Got kicked out of that Sacramento series. Like there was a lot going on, and you reward him with a 4-year deal. And now this offseason, I'm sitting here and I'm going like, so Klay's not going to come back. At least that's the feeling that we have today. And this guy gets rewarded with a 4-year deal. It's a tough one to swallow. Like as I'm looking at the Warriors organization, like really?
Well, Laker did tell us in the studio that, Draymond drove down to his house. They had dinner. They talked everything out. He got the 4-year deal with the player option. With that said, Jordan Poole got shipped out as they were looking for a backup point guard. It's pretty ironic because on this team, what they were missing was a guy who could blow by their defender at the point of attack and dribble drive penetrate. So